utilized. In the 1970s, the state of Colorado entitled its Colorado Water Conservation Board, a state agency, with the right to appropriate water rights for in-stream flow or environmental uses. So if you think about it, those 1970s water rights are very, very junior. In a year like this, it's very unlikely that they are going to be satisfied. Let's go to the next slide. The result in a lot of the places where Colorado Water Trust works, and these are pictures of the places where we work, are low flow or dry river beds. And this does happen across our state, not only late in the summer, but sometimes earlier in the summer, because we do have so many water rights that are taking water out of our streams and rivers. We don't have regulations that protect a minimum amount of water in our rivers. The thing that we do have that keeps water in rivers are the Colorado Water Conservation Board making junior appropriations of water. And in a good year, that does keep some water in our rivers. But in a year like this, it is insufficient to protect flows in most of our rivers. But we do have another tool. Let's go to the next slide. So things are starting to look a little bit more complicated in this slide. The next way we have to protect water in rivers is to change senior water rights so they can be used for in-stream flow. What you can do in Colorado, you can use a very senior water right, like that 1890 water right. In this example, you can go to water court and have that water right changed so that it's used no longer for its original appropriation, whether it was agriculture or mining or municipal use. It can be used for something different, like in-stream flow, flowing in the river, and it retains that senior appropriation date. So in this example, this would be an example where the Colorado Water Trust worked with the Colorado Water Conservation Board, and we acquired an 1890 water right. Maybe we leased it, maybe we purchased it and used it permanently. There are all sorts of different ways we could do this. But we would go and we get approval from our state water court to have that water be instead protected in the river rather than being diverted under its 1890 priority. Let's move to the last slide that I'm going to present to you. So, oops, sorry, back one slide, please. So for Colorado Water Trust, we work in our rivers to acquire water rights from our partners or together with our partners and use that water for in-stream flow or to protect it in rivers. This slide shows you Boulder Creek. Boulder Creek is a really interesting example. This August, what we will see is that the Colorado Water Conservation Board does have a water right that it appropriated in the late 1900s, in the 1980s, for in-stream flow on the creek. That water is not going to be in priority this year. There's not going to be enough water in the creek. There are going to be 3 ways, however, that there will be water remaining in Boulder Creek. One is because they're downstream water users. There's irrigation downstream in the South Platte Basin of eastern Colorado, and there's municipal uses that are going to keep water in the river flowing from the mountains out east. There's also water rights that have been changed by the city of Boulder that are used for in-stream flow by the Colorado Water Conservation Board under their senior appropriation dates. That will keep some water in the river. And then the third and final way that we will have some water in Boulder Creek is that the Colorado Water Trust has interests in an upstream reservoir way up in the Indian Peaks, and will be protecting water that's released from that reservoir down through Boulder Canyon in the city of Boulder. So it's just pretty interesting, I think, to think about how in our rivers, if we have certain water right structures, we may have water flowing in our rivers. If we don't have those kinds of water rights in a year like this, there may be rivers that are going completely dry. And so I'll pass it on to Danielle and Holly to talk more specifically about the rivers that they work on.
All right, can everyone hear me? Thanks, Kate. Um, Thanks, Kate. My name's Danielle, and Kate just walked you through Water Rights 101 and how we keep water in rivers. And I'm here to explain to you two projects that we're running this summer and how they will operate. So first, I just wanted to kind of start with some stats on conditions for this year. As you're all aware, 2026 is not a normal year. Snowpack peaked at 55% of median, which is the lowest on record. Runoff came at least a month early, and on the Colorado River near Grand Junction, runoff peaked at around 2,500 CFS in March, and a normal peak is closer to 13,000 CFS. So I'm just going to pause here to kind of let that sink in. Um, Cool. Barrett, you can move on to the next slide, please. So I'm going to talk you through two rivers or two projects on two different rivers that we're working on, one on the Colorado River and one on the Yampa River. And next slide, please. So our first project that I'll explain is on the Colorado River. So we lease water that flows through more than 150 miles of river, starting in the frying pan above Basalt, then going down to the Roaring Fork, and then down into the Colorado River, and finishing its journey just at the Roller Dam diversion upstream of Palisade. So this water supports a really cool mix of fish populations. On the frying pan and Roaring Fork, it's a gold medal trout fishing industry, a huge economic driver for the region, and you'll mostly find trophy browns and rainbow trout. Then down on the Colorado, we have some native species, some suckers, so bluehead and flannelmouth, and then the round-tailed chub. And then further downstream in more kind of the arid, drier environments, we have federally endangered Colorado pike minnow and the razorback sucker. So, especially in drought years like this, flows on all three of these rivers drop to levels that stress fish out. And our leased water helps provide things like thermal refuge, aquatic food base, and fish passage through the corridor to help keep these fish populations alive, um, and hopefully thriving. But this year it's mostly just alive. Next slide, please. So where does our water come from for this project and why is it available? So we lease our water out of Rudite Reservoir, and Rudite Reservoir sits in the in the upper Frying Pan Valley above Basalt, and it holds about 102,000 acre feet and was built by the Bureau of Reclamation as part of the Frying Pan Arkansas project, locally known as the FryArk project. So this project is a massive water diversion and delivery system that moves water from the Colorado River Basin across the Continental Divide to serve southeastern Colorado. And one of RUDI's specific purposes is just to compensate Colorado River Basin water users for those transmountain diversions, which is a whole complicated story. But basically, water rights that are stored in this river are held by a variety of entities and not just one, which isn't always the case with reservoirs. So this season, we've leased 4,700 acre feet from two different entities that own water in Rudite Reservoir. The first is QB Energy, which is an oil and natural gas company, and the second is the town of Palisade. So both of these entities chose to lease water to us for the benefit of the environment this season. And so next, I wanted to kind of explain just the nuance around what we're going to do with that water and how we operate. And I think that kind of correlates to our title question of why is there water in this river and not that. So when Rudite releases water in the frying pan, it doesn't just flow as a free-for-all downriver in unlimited quantities. There's constraints on how much water the river can handle, and we're not the only ones making requests to release water out of the river. So the frying pan has an in-stream flow a decreed in-stream flow of 110 CFS through the irrigation season, and then the Roaring Fork has an in-stream flow of 145 CFS. And both of those numbers are important for us to keep in mind as target flows. But there's also an upper limit. So there's a prominent fishery below Rudai that's sensitive to high flows. And Colorado Parks and Wildlife recommends keeping that reach of the river below 300 CFS outside of spring runoff. Anything above 300 CFS, it becomes difficult for the anglers to wade, and it becomes out of the optimal flow for both fish and anglers. We try to keep it around 250, but 300 is kind of the max. So we're not just trying to add water, we're also trying to add the right amount of water in coordination with other entities who are also making releases. And so this season, I suspect we'll see flows on the frying pan hit that 250 slash 300 CFS threshold just due to the demand from so many entities who own or lease water out of Rudai. So currently, a little bit earlier this season, the frying pan was sitting at 110 CFS, so like just at the flow target. And the Colorado River Recovery Program, who also owns water in Rudai and releases for the benefit of fish as well, increased their releases, and that bumped flows to about 30 to 50 CFS. So we're seeing about 143 in the frying pan. And then the Roaring Fork is at around 300 CFS. So in this moment, both rivers are satisfied, and it took some active management to get there. But yeah, overall, our water from this project travels 150 miles down from Rudai to the Roller Dam diversion by Palisade. And it's a pretty active process that involves lots of coordination with the Bureau of Rec, the recovery program, Colorado water users, Division of Water Resources, and our lease partners. Currently, we're not making releases out of Rudai. We're still waiting for approval, going through our approval process. But I'm hoping that water will be available for release as soon as possible. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's head north to the Yampa River Basin near Steamboat Springs at Stagecoach Reservoir. So we hold an in-stream flow loan agreement like the one Kate explained with the Colorado Water Conservation Board. And this allows us to lease water from Stagecoach Reservoir and deliver that water to a 5.4-mile reach to of the Yampa below the dam that's protecting a decreed in-stream flow reach. So we've operated this loan for 3 out of 3 years, and state rules allow in-stream flow loans to operate up to 3 consecutive years before a required pause. Our pool for this season of stored water that we have available for us to release is 3,600 acre feet. We have a maximum release of 100 CFS, and we cannot exceed 120 days of releasing. This table here on the right shows CPW recommended flow targets. And the one that we have really stuck to is that 72.5 CFS during the summer season. And that's on typical years when we run this project. So I'm going to explain to you what operations has looked like a little bit, or has looked like this season so far. Next slide, please. So this season has looked quite a bit different than past, and flows on this reach of the river are at around 30 CFS, which is well below the 72.5 flow target and has been well below this flow target since around June 6th. And on June 19th, about 13 days after June 6th, when flows were at 44 CFS, we decided to start making releases. So we decided to start making releases 2 weeks after flows were well below the flow target for several reasons. One was we knew that we couldn't make enough releases to sustain that 72.5 flow rate and hold with our limited storage pool and hold on to water long term into the summer months. So it was early to mid-June and the water was still cold. So fish could tolerate low flows in colder water. And our current concern really wasn't June when temperatures were still kind of cold. Our major critical period when we're trying to get water in rivers is late irrigation season, so late July and August, when temperatures are at their warmest and flow drops can be lethal to fish populations. So for this year, we developed with CPW an extreme drought flow target. And this is anywhere between 25 and CFS rather than that fixed rate of 72.5. And we're working weekly with CPW biologists. They're going out in the field and doing habitat assessments in this reach of the river and letting us know what they're finding on these low flows and how stressed the fish actually are. And then based on those findings, we make release decisions. So on this chart here, you'll see the black line shows flows in the river on the Yampa in the reach that we're concerned about from May through today. And you can see that things declined pretty sharply from 200 CFS down to 30 CFS, which is where we're at right now. Just for kind of to ground you, historical average flows for today are generally around 170 CFS, so we're at 17% of average today. And then the story here that you're seeing in this map is, so the green shading is Water Trust environmental releases on the right side. You can see we started releases on June 19th. And then before that point, flows were supported by Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District operational releases, which also boosted flows in the river. So our releases are currently making up about 83% of total flows in this reach of the Yampa as of today. Next slide, please, Barrett. So I wanted to close my projects and tie these together. So these projects aren't just, sign contracts and walk away. They take quite a bit of management and coordination. So we're monitoring USGS gauges daily. We're coordinating with federal agencies and Colorado Parks and Wildlife on fish needs. We're talking on the phone, talking to project partners on delivery logistics, navigating water administration with DWR, and on weekly calls with multiple stakeholders of water users on both rivers each week. So in an extreme drought year like this, every acre foot counts, and we're making our best attempt to hold storage pools at the moment as long as possible. We turn down releases when we see rain might be coming, and we adjust for other events as well. I know this week's stagecoach release was increased by 5 CFS due to the extreme forecasted temperatures for the weekend, particularly on Sunday. But this is kind of what environmental releases for stored water management looks like in practice. We're using real-time data. We're making judgment calls. It's not a perfect science. It's definitely more of an art. That's kind of project management on our end for reservoirs. And next slide, please. So back to the title question, why is there water in some rivers this summer and not others? And from my opinion, sometimes it's geography, sometimes it's water right seniority and availability, and other times it's a bit of luck. More often than not, though, it's the people and the communities we work with that make it happen. A reservoir operator is going to make a release, a project partner is willing to lease us water, and CPW is willing to go into the river to evaluate conditions. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Holly, who's a prominent project partner of ours at Upper Yampa, and she'll give you some context on why we can even operate our project on the Yampa, especially in a drought year like this.
Thank you, Danielle. Hi, everyone. Holly Kirkpatrick, Public Affairs Manager for the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District. As a longtime resident of the Yampa Valley, I want to share the story of keeping flows in the Yampa River with you today. We're lucky to be one of the rivers that benefit from having water in it, maybe even when there shouldn't be water available. And so to give you a little bit of background, I want to start by taking a look at the basin. Next slide, please. For those of you who may not be familiar, the Yampa Basin is located in northwest Colorado and Routt and Moffat counties. It starts in the flat tops and flows north, then west, about 250 miles to its confluence with the Green River. We do not have a lot of storage in this basin. If you total the 5 reservoirs that I have circled on this map here, our total basin storage is only about 105,000 acre feet. To put that into perspective for some of you, Denver Water's largest reservoir, Dillon Reservoir, in between Dillon and Frisco along I-70, um, if you totaled the storage in the Yampa Basin, that only equals about 40% of the capacity of Lake Dillon. So we have a little bit of storage to work with. But as you can see, most of our reservoirs are located pretty high up in the watershed. Next slide, please. So what that means for us is that the Yampa follows a very natural hydrograph. We see big spikes during peak runoff from April to June typically, and then every year, even in a wet year, our base flows are going to drop in the late summer months. This year, we are seeing, much lower flows, historical inflows, and that's having some impacts. But in any given year, the Yampa River still follows that very natural hydrograph, and we have a limited amount of storage that we're working with. So, given all of those factors, how are we keeping water in the Yampa? Next slide, please. And the answer to that is Stagecoach Reservoir. Stagecoach Reservoir is owned and operated by the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District. We own the water rights in the reservoir and lease stored water for agricultural, industrial, municipal, and environmental uses downstream. Next slide, please. As Danielle mentioned, a couple of things have to come together to ensure that environmental releases can benefit a river, can keep flows in a river, especially during dry years like this one. So I want to take a look at a few different factors that influence this environmental release program. First of all, geographically, it works out. Stagecoach is located near the headwaters of the Yampa River and is just upstream of the in-stream flow reach that Danielle described to all of you. Next slide, please. Secondly, it doesn't just have to work out geographically, but you have to have water available in order to make a program like this work. And for Stagecoach, which was constructed in 1989, initially there were about 15,000 acre feet of water in the reservoir under contract when it filled. Those were primarily industrial contracts for 2 coal-fired power plants located downstream of Stagecoach. There is a coal-fired power plant located in Hayden and one in Craig. Both the Hayden and Craig stations are scheduled to close in the coming years. So in the early years of the reservoir, those contracts for coal-fired power plants downstream utilized the majority of the stored water in the reservoir. As additional water rights were acquired by those power companies, some of those industrial contracts were reduced. And then in 2012, during another extreme drought year, not quite as bad as what we're seeing this year, but certainly a drought year, the Water Trust and Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District partnered to utilize the in-stream flow below Stagecoach Reservoir for the first time. So at that time, the district contracted 4,000 acre feet for that in-stream flow. In 2019, the coal-fired power plants in Hayden and Craig announced their closure. And at that point, they canceled all of those industrial contracts in Stagecoach Reservoir, which freed up a lot more water for lease in the future. Since 2022, the Colorado Water Trust has actually been the largest contract holder for stored water in Stagecoach Reservoir. We do have some smaller contracts for agricultural, industrial, and municipal use that now total about 6,000 acre feet. The total storage capacity of Stagecoach is just over 36,000 acre feet. So this is a small reservoir, but fortunately, we are able to offer some flexibility because we have water available due to all of these circumstances. Next slide, please. That flexibility allows us to strengthen our partnership with the Colorado Water Trust through offering a flexible contract. You can see from the history here, the releases that have been made since 2012. Sometimes we're utilizing that in-stream flow, and other times we are not utilizing that in-stream flow. But there's been a range of release volumes. The board of directors at the district decides annually how much water they will allocate for contract to the Colorado Water Trust. And once that allocation is made, the Water Trust has a flexible payment schedule that allows them to only pay for the water that they utilize. So, for example, if the board were to allocate 5,000 acre feet of water, for a given year, and the Water Trust only used 2,000 acre feet, that they would pay for the use of the 2,000 acre feet rather than the 5,000. So having that flexibility really allows everyone in the basin to kind of stay nimble and make decisions on the fly as we're seeing conditions play out in real time. Next slide, please. So what does that look like in 2026? How is the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District making that allocation? Danielle mentioned that they only have 3,600 acre feet available this year. For the past 2 years, they have had 5,100 acre feet of water available. However, things that our board has to take into consideration when they're making that allocation is the volume of water that is available in the reservoir. So back in March, we had about 72% full. Now the reservoir has drained just slightly to about 67% full. And we did have historical low inflows at Stagecoach Reservoir this year. So we were unable to store water during what would typically be our peak runoff time. Our peak inflow occurred in early March at about 40 CFS. The inflow range from April to June, which is our typical peak runoff, ranged from 1.5 to 30 CFS. 1.5 CFS. So we didn't have a lot of water coming into the reservoir, and those are things that we have to take into consideration. We also want to consider how often the reservoir fills, and it has filled 67% of the time since 2000. So, taking into consideration that this is an unprecedented year, and we certainly hope that that's not coming again in the future, but we do need to be prepared for that. And we need to take into consideration how long it will take the reservoir to recover from this extreme drought. Next slide, please. I just wanted to also point out the community impacts for this program. As I mentioned, I'm a longtime resident, and I think just the general consensus of community is that these environmental releases support one of our most treasured assets in the Yampa Valley, and that is the Yampa River, which is the lifeblood of the valley. Oftentimes, the releases from Stagecoach will account for more than half of the river flow, even beyond the in-stream flow reach that has been highlighted. So the picture that you see here is from last week. That's actually through the city of Steamboat Springs. Um, the city of Steamboat Springs is a popular tourist destination, and the river is one of the economic drivers of that tourism in the summer months. So in some years, when there's more water available, the flows from environmental releases have been able to stave off recreational closures on the river, and that helps keep local businesses open. This year, as Danielle mentioned, we're trying to keep fish alive. So that's not the case this year. We already have 3 stretches of river under a recreational closure below Stagecoach Reservoir and anticipate that those are going to be in place for the remainder of the summer without any significant monsoon seasons. Um, so those releases are really impactful for our communities and have been for the last 14 years. Next slide, please. And the reason we've been able to do that for 14 years here in the Yampa Valley is because we have so much collaboration between the organizations that you see listed here on the screen. When those industrial contracts were canceled in Stagecoach Reservoir in 2019, the Yampa River Fund, an endowment fund that helps support the purchase of stored water for environmental releases, was created. We have tools that are available to us now because of the hard work and dedication of our community members over the last 14 years. We have these tools available so that even in years when the in-stream flow loan will not be available, like next year, for example, we have already utilized this for the in-stream flow program for 3 consecutive years. So we know that that won't be available in 2027. But because we have all of this collaboration here in the Yampa Valley, we know that we'll be able to continue this program. And we have tools available to help deliver water for the health of the river downstream. And I think that's a really unique situation in the state of Colorado. And I just feel so fortunate to be a part of the community that does have water available in the river, even when it probably shouldn't. And with that, I think we can take questions.
Thanks, everyone. So if anybody has a question, you are welcome to either raise your hand or just jump in and turn your microphone on and speak up or type it into the chat. And I'll start reading. We just have a couple of questions in the chat right now, so we can read those off and see if anyone has answers while everyone else queues up your questions. So the first one was, what consideration is taken toward the state park recreational usage of Stagecoach? And also, what year did Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District acquire ownership?
The Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District has owned and operated the reservoir. We constructed the dam in 1988. The reservoir filled in 1989. So we have always had ownership of the reservoir, and Colorado Parks and Wildlife manages the recreation there at the state park. And some of the things that we take into consideration when we're thinking about recreation usage of Stagecoach, there is a marina available there, and we have already been working with that marina owner to ensure that we're closely monitoring those water levels and have a plan in place to extend the boat ramp should that be needed. So those are the kinds of things that we take into consideration. We also work closely with Colorado Parks and Wildlife to monitor water quality at the reservoir as well.
And what happens to this in-stream flow water after it passes the reaches you're trying to impact? Does it get diverted by junior water users downstream? How does that change the call on the river?
I can tackle this one. Our water on the Colorado River does get diverted by water users downstream. And and then the question about the call, we do have a project on Elkhead Reservoir on the lower Yampa that does help mitigate calls on the river while also benefiting the environment. So it just depends on the project. Some projects, water can get shepherded beyond water rights diverters, and sometimes they can't. And an incidental benefit can be water for junior water users downstream.
Has the Trump administration's requirement to keep coal plants open affected any of your water plans?
I think that one might be directed to me. It has not. The Craig station has received an executive order to keep Unit 1 on standby. I believe that went into effect in the spring and is still in effect, but that has not impacted their water usage. They have their own water rights portfolio and have water available, but we have spoke with them and they know that we do still have some water available for contract in Stagecoach Reservoir should that be necessary. But that hasn't significantly impacted their plan, aside from, the scheduled shutdown.
And another question, is it a common practice for mining operations and/or power plants that are closing to convert their water rights for environmental releases?
I can take that one. We have been contacted from time to time by mining operators who are closing to see whether Colorado Water Trust might be a good acquisition partner for their water rights. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. It depends on the river, depends how much water is needed on that river, when it is needed, and it also, another really common, or I'd say more common relationship between Colorado Water Trust and industrial water users are leasing opportunities. So there can be operations that may need water use in the future, but don't at the present time. And so they would lease us their water and we would use it for environmental purposes or in-stream flow while they are waiting it out to see what they want to do with their water rights.
And we have a question about in-stream flow support above Stagecoach for environmental purposes. And I think there might be a typo in the question, but it says it's been 1 to 4 CFS for weeks.
Yes, hi Steve. I know that you are very aware of those inflows as they pass through your property there. Uh, and he is correct. The inflow to Stagecoach has been between 1 and we got some rain the other day and maybe some irrigators turned off, so I think it bumped up to 6. But the inflow to Stagecoach Reservoir has been in the single digits for quite some time now. And I know that there are some conversations happening about an in-stream flow above Stagecoach Reservoir, but there is not one in operation at the moment. There's also less water available for lease upstream of Stagecoach. There is a little bit of water in a municipal pool available in Yamcolo Reservoir. And then there's a CPW reservoir, Bear Lake, just upstream of Yamcolo. And then Stillwater Reservoir is privately owned and owned by the Bear River Reservoir Company to use as irrigation water.
Then we have a couple of questions that are kind of greater basin-wide concern questions. So one is, what kind of pressure is being applied by the Bureau of Reclamation to send water to Lake Powell? And The other is what's the guess on what day the call will come on the lower part of the Yampa River, thus affecting the entire basin?
I can take the Lake Powell question. From a Colorado Water Trust perspective, we do not see federal pressure on ourselves as water users and the water rights that we protect within the state. All of the conversations that are going on are very much at a high state administrative level at this point in time. We do have a lot of conversations within the state about what potential solutions might be because, of course, the specter of some sort of administration in causing us to use water differently is real. And at some point in time, it seems like there will be some impact, but everything that Colorado Water Trust does with water right owners and with the water that we own is on a voluntary basis, and nothing is forced. It's all cooperation that's making our projects happen at this point in time.
And then another water trust question. Can you provide a brief update on the Poudre Flows project?
And I can do that one too because I worked on that project for several years. So for those of you who aren't familiar, our Poudre Flows project is something that is taking place on the Cache la Poudre River, where it runs from the mouth of the Poudre Canyon about 50 miles down through the cities of Fort Collins and Greeley to the confluence with the South Platte River. And that is a project in which we have coordinated with municipal water users, with Fort Collins, Thornton, and Greeley, to use their water rights in what's called a plan for augmentation. So that's another water court process, kind of similar but different to using senior water rights with a change of water rights. You can use still that senior priority, take advantage of that to protect water in the river. Plan for augmentation is a little bit more complicated, but effectively does the same thing, helps you use senior water rights and protect water in the river. And that was a very complicated water court application. We filed the water court application in 2020 after also going through a legislative process to clear the way and provide more direction on how this plan for augmentation might work. We got a water court decree in late 2025, and we have protected some water in the Poudre using that plan in the past. Another thing that Colorado Water Trust does every year with our partners is we do a lot of discussion on whether they want to use their water rights in a water trust project that year. Whether the cities will be able to use their water this year, potentially Greeley, Fort Collins might be able to do it, but it's a really tricky drought year. So I'm not sure if we're going to operate the project this year, but we are all set up and ready to go in future years with the Poudre Flows project.
Thank you. Does anybody else have questions? Anything else you want to hop in and ask before we wrap up? And if not, a huge thank you to all of our speakers, Kate, Danielle, Holly. It was great to have you and to learn from you. And thanks to everyone who joined us today. You saw the links in the chat from the Water Trust, and come learn with WECO anytime. Visit us online. And it was great to see everyone. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.